That is what we have been talking about in the early weeks here of 2017, and that's what we're going to continue with for the next few weeks. All things new. With that, start with a question this morning. Who knows what this is right here? Who can tell me what this is? A cornucopia, right? Or a horn of plenty. Anybody call it a horn of plenty or ever heard it called that? A cornucopia. Just in case you're wondering, yes, the fruit is real this morning, and if you're lucky, maybe I'll let you have some on your way out. It is delicious, I'm sure. A cornucopia is, of course, something that we here in our American culture typically use in the fall season, the harvest season, to decorate our homes with. It's just sort of become a fall decoration that we're accustomed to. But I want to take you this morning on a little bit of a journey back in time to a more ancient place. We're going to talk a little bit about the cornucopia, and you're wondering, well, what in the world is this going to have to do? Trust me, it's all going to make sense as we kind of get along here. And so we're going to go to a city from the ancient world known as Colossae. We actually have a map of the Mediterranean, I believe, here this morning, and you can see Colossae right up here to your right, my left, is a city that's in what is now modern-day Turkey. And the city doesn't exist anymore. It was destroyed by earthquake in the first century. But at the time, you can see that's where it was located inland in the land that is now Turkey. In the time of the Apostle Paul, when the letter to the Colossians was written, though, Colossae was a thriving city. And you would find the city located at the base of a mountain known as Mount Cadmus. In fact, we actually have a picture of kind of what modern-day Colossae looks like, which isn't much. It's just a big mound of dirt, basically. But you can see Mount Cadmus there in the background. And every spring, what would happen is that the snow-peaked mountaintop of Mount Cadmus, it would begin to melt down, and it would run down into the valley that Colossae was located in, the Lycus River Valley. And the result was this, that the region of Colossae and around Colossae was an absolute produce paradise. It was a lush land that was an agricultural wonderland as far as that went. And so actually we have a picture of some grape clusters that are from right around that region in the world. It was a lush place, a strong agricultural setting. And history, what it reveals is that the cornucopia, I had to kind of bring this to the cornucopia was in the region a prevalent symbol. You would see it in lots of the artwork, and you'd see it in lots of the statues and lots of the imagery of that region in that time and place was the cornucopia. Because what does the cornucopia represent? The cornucopia represents provision. It represents abundance. It represents overflow. The cornucopia is sort of a picture that all is good in the world, right? And that we're celebrating God's provision, that you are a resident of Colossae. Okay? You're a resident of Colossae in the time of the Apostle Paul, and now it's the time of year to pull out the cornucopia and to fill it with all kinds of delicious stuff like this. You pull it out, and here's the question to you, the resident of Colossae. Who gets the credit for this? Who gets the credit for this? Okay, I'll give you a hint. If you're a resident of Colossae, the answer isn't Jesus. You say, I thought we were in church, Pastor Ryan. The answer is always Jesus, right? It's like the Sunday school teacher. He asked his class one day, what's black and white, produces milk, and says moo. Little boy raises his hand and says, well, teacher, it sounds an awful lot like a cow, but since we're in church, I'm assuming the answer is probably Jesus, right? So, the answer to this question is not Jesus. If you are a resident of Colossae, the answer to the question of who gets credit for this is Rome. Rome is who gets the credit. It was the emperor. It was the Roman gods. It was the military might of Rome. It was the greatness of Rome. The belief was that the Roman gods would actually come and live in the form of that Roman emperor. And so everything good that you had as a resident of Colossae, the teaching and the belief was that it came not from what we would call Jehovah God or from Jesus. The teaching was that it came as a result of the might and the power of Rome. Rome's representatives, its all-powerful gods, that was what they were celebrating with the cornucopia. Which brings us this morning to Paul's letter to the Colossians. Colossians is written to a church that is very, very much in its infancy as a church. These are brand new believers. They have not believed in Christ for a very long time at all. Anybody that's reading this letter when it's originally written they've just recently put their faith in Jesus. In fact, the Apostle Paul, at the time that he wrote this letter, he had not even visited the city of Colossae yet. He had never been there. Okay, so he's writing this letter to this brand new formed church. And as he's writing this letter, remember now, you're thinking about things like, you know what, everything I have in life, all the good things I have, I'm giving credit to Rome. Okay, and Paul is about to challenge this way of thinking. Listen to what he writes in Colossians 1. If you have your Bibles, you can go Colossians 1, verse 15. This is a passage that's talking all about Jesus. Okay, it says this. It says, the Son is the image of the invisible God and the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything he might have the supremacy. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. This morning, as we take the next step in this progression of this series, All Things New, really what the question is this morning, it's a question of centrality, okay? We sang all about it a few minutes ago, but what is or who is at the center of your life? See, here's what I can tell you, is that our lives tend to revolve around something, don't they? They revolve around something. There tends to be kind of a big thing of sorts that is sort of the focal point, the center point of our life, and all the other little things in life tend to revolve around that big thing. So what is the central thing in your life around which all the other little things revolve? It could be a job. It could be a person like your spouse or your kids. It could be a hobby. It could be making money. It could be the football team that you support. It could be, maybe you live for the weekend. Maybe you just can't wait until you can get together with your coworkers. 5 o'clock hits, and boy, we're off to the bar to tip back a few drinks, and that's what you live for. That's the central thing of your life. It could be the buzz that you get off of your social media page. Oh boy, every time I get a new like or a new friend request or whatever, like I just live for that feeling. And maybe that's the central thing of your life. Okay, it could be a talent you have. Could be so many things could fit that role. It's the centerpiece that everything else seems to revolve around. If you were a member of the city of Colossae, the answer to that question was Rome. Rome was the central thing around everything else. Revolved around Rome and all that Rome provided and all that Rome did, and everything that was good came from Rome. And so then the Apostle Paul, he writes this letter to these new Christians, and he writes those verses that we just read, verses 15 through 20, and what he's urging them is to no longer put Rome at the center of their life, but to put Christ at the center of their lives. And he does it in pretty convincing fashion because, Paul doesn't just come and say to the Colossians, hey, listen, stop having Rome at the center and start putting Jesus there. Right? He doesn't do it quite that way. He gives some pretty convincing reasons why they should choose Christ as their central thing. And that's what we're hoping to do here today as well, is to give you a convincing reason why should I put Christ as the central thing in my life. Because here's what I can tell you. I mean, let's just be honest about this, okay? You're going to need a pretty good reason why. Because when you put Christ at the center of your life, he's probably not going to leave well enough alone. Can we agree on that? When you put Jesus at the center of your life, he's probably not going to look at the landscape of your life and say, actually everything's kind of organized the way I want it, and let's just leave it good enough alone. I don't think that's what's going to happen. He tends to mess around with things when you put him at the center of your life. When you say, okay, you're the center, he tends to change things around. Okay? He's probably, if you put him at the center of your life, he's probably going to ask you to start loving that really annoying person, right? That's in your life. That's going to be hard to do. He's probably going to ask you to treat the drivers in the Walmart parking lot a little differently than you do right now. And that might be hard to do. He's probably going to ask you to start loving that person who really hurts you. And that's going to be hard to do. He's probably even going to, maybe he's going to even tell you not to watch that program anymore. That one with the junk in it that you already know you shouldn't be watching? He's probably going to challenge you about those types of things. And so if you're going to put Christ at the center of your life, you're going to do it knowing, hey, he's probably going to mess with the equation a little bit. Am I okay with that? So why should I let Jesus mess with me? Paul gives 2 reasons this morning that we're going to highlight in Colossians 1. 2 reasons why you should really put Christ at the center of your life. If you're taking notes, these would be great things to jot down. Number one is this. He made everything, including you. He made everything, including you. Let's just reread a couple of those verses, starting in verse 15. And here's what I want you to do. Every time you see the phrase all things up there, would you just read it out loud with me? Okay? You don't have to read the whole thing, just when it's all things. But when you read it loud, okay? Give it to me good. Here we go. The Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created. Things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Are you getting the idea that there's a theme here that Paul is saying all things, everything, you, me, and everything has been created by him. And not just created by him, but created for him. Okay? And so, maybe you look, okay, yeah, like I get it. God created everything. I get it. Yeah, but do you? But do we get that? Because it's not just the stuff that we see. It's the stuff we don't see. He created that too. Do you realize that right now there are frequencies, I don't understand how this all works, but there's like these wave frequency things like shooting through here right now that we can't see. Right? They're moving all around. God created that. Right? UV rays. You can't see them. He created wind. He created it. Right? Do you know that every single year on average, this astounded me when I discovered this week in studying for this. Every single year, our scientists discover on average 15,000 new organic species. 15,000 every year that we did not know. Now, many of them are like bacteria and tiny little things that we could have never seen until we finally created a microscope, strong enough to see them. And so we're discovering those things now. But some of them are things like birds and fish and things in the sea. I mean, stop and think about this. God created the little sea crab that's at the bottom of the ocean out in the Pacific somewhere that no human eye is ever going to see, never going to look on that thing. But God created it. Even though you don't see it, it's there. He created it all. He is the supreme Lord, and he alone is the supreme Lord, not just on earth, but over everything, including the heavens, verse 16 says. Not just heaven like, hey, we're going to go to heaven and live with God. I'm talking like the universe, the heavens, okay? He's created it all. Verse 17 says that in him all things hold together. So the entire universe, it's ordered just the way he wants it. And Jesus, he's the glue that holds it together, right? You remove him and the whole thing falls apart. And so in short, what Colossians 1 is saying is this: Jesus is the center, right? That'd be a great way to summarize that. Jesus is the center. He created it all. Isaiah 40 describes it a little differently. says this, "Who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, or with the breadth of his hand marked off the heavens? Who has held the dust of the earth in a basket, or weighed the mountains on the scales and hills in a balance? Who can fathom the Spirit of the Lord, or instruct the Lord as his counselor?" Whether you realize it, whether you've understood it, whether you've acknowledged it, whether you've believed it or not. Nate, you preached my sermon a few minutes ago when you were talking about this. Whether you ever understood it or confessed it or not, okay? He is the center of everything. He created everything. Why should Jesus have a place in your heart as the center of your life? Well, what if he made you? What if it's because he made you? Say, well Pastor, our schools aren't teaching this anymore, right? Like, this isn't exactly what our schools are teaching. They're teaching, that everything just kind of happened by chance, and, we just are sort of here, and there's not really any meaning behind life. There's no reason for us to be here. Just, a couple of collisions happened in outer space 4 million years ago, and voila, here we are. Do people still believe that God created us? Well, yeah, some people do. I believe that. I was directed earlier this week to a book that I picked up and have just started reading. There it is. Miracles. What they are, why they happen, and how they can change your life, written by a man named Eric Metaxas. So far it's been a good read, but chapter 4 really intrigued me. Chapter 4 is called "Is Life a Miracle?" And Metaxas points out some pretty startling scientific things about the world, planet Earth, that you and I call home. And so this is just kind of fun, but just allow your mind to kind of just be wowed by some of this. So take, for example, the rate of speed at which the Earth spins. So we have a picture of our fine world here somewhere. There it is. There's home, okay? And so if you had a science class that's somewhere along the way, you learned that our Earth revolves once every 24 hours, right? One revolution every 24 hours. And so has anybody ever found yourself wishing you could have just a little bit of a longer day? Like, man, I could just use a little bit more time to get all this stuff done. Maybe like 30 hours. Maybe if I just had like a 30-hour day or 32-hour, I could just get all this stuff. Listen, that would be a bad thing, and I'm going to tell you why, okay? Because if the day was longer, it would mean that the Earth had to revolve slower, right? And if the Earth revolves slower, here's what physicists suggest would happen. That by adding, let's say, 3 to 4 hours of sunlight, and thereby adding also 3 to 4 more hours of darkness each day, what would happen is the Earth's temperatures would spike. So everybody's heard about global warming, but this would be global warming to the extreme, because what would happen is those 3 to 4 extra hours of daylight would cause the high temperatures to go much higher, and the 3 to 4 hours of darkness would cause the low temperatures to go much lower. So take Friday, for example. Friday, when I woke up, I jumped in the car about 6:30 in the morning and headed off to get after the day. It was about 20 below that morning when I jumped in the car. But by the middle of the day, it had raised, it was somewhere like 7 degrees. It was, whoa, really warm, right? Okay. But like 27 degree swing or something like that over the course of the day. And that kind of thing is not unusual at all, right? And so what Metaxas says, or the physicists say, is that if we had a longer day, if the Earth were to revolve more slowly, okay, our highs would be so high that life would be unbearable, and our lows would go so low that life would be unbearable. Okay, well, what if it went just a little faster? What if the Earth's revolution was once every like 22 hours instead of 24 hours? Well, what they say then is that the wind speeds that we would experience would be so out of control, it would make life unlivable. So we don't really know how fast it would be, but on Jupiter, they routinely clock wind speeds up to 1,000 miles an hour. Jupiter spins much faster than we do, okay? I would suggest to you that 1,000-mile-an-hour winds would make life slightly challenging, okay? Good luck with your toupee, right? I mean, like, for one thing, okay? It would be challenging, okay? Now, speaking of Jupiter, by the way, I think we have a picture of Jupiter. There's Jupiter, and there's Earth in comparison. Jupiter is absolutely gigantic, okay? It's absolutely massive. It is 300 times larger in mass than the planet Earth. Okay, what that means, now you have to understand a little bit about science, so I'm no scientific wonder boy here, but I'm going to do my best to explain it to you. Okay, 300 times larger mass equates to 300 times stronger gravitational pull. Okay,
So Jupiter has a very strong gravitational pull. You say, well, what does that have to do with us here on Earth? Well, in space, there's these things called comets, and there's these other things called meteors, right? And they're flying, they're darting all around out there in space, and many of them are on a collision course for Earth, okay? Except for Jupiter. Because Jupiter's proximity to Earth and its incredibly strong gravitational pull pulls many of those things away from Earth. In fact, they would hit Earth with something like 1,000 times more frequency if Jupiter was not exactly where it is. Okay? It's placed precisely where it needs to be in the cosmos so that these comets and these meteors are drawn away from Earth and they don't collide with us. Now, a few years back, there was a movie, some of you probably saw it, called Armageddon. And Bruce Willis and Ben Affleck, they jumped in a space shuttle and they flew up to one of those meteors and they just detonated it with a nuclear bomb. Okay? So maybe we don't need Jupiter. You know, I don't know. Bruce Willis, Jupiter. You pick. I'm going to take Jupiter, I guess. Okay? God's provided this great solution. Okay? So tonight, when you're thanking the Lord for, the bountiful meal that you enjoy together, or you're thanking the Lord for the warm house, take a moment and thank him for Jupiter. I bet you never have before, but thank him for Jupiter because he's placed it there for a reason, okay? And while you're thanking him for Jupiter, why don't you thank him for the moon as well, okay? Not just because the moon is pretty and it can be beautiful. Yes, it's wonderful, okay? But the moon, if you remember science class, is responsible for what activity here on Earth? Who knows? The tides. The tides. Now, the moon is remarkable. The moon is also placed precisely the right distance away from the Earth and precisely the size it needs to be. Scientists, physicists have understood that if the moon were even just incrementally larger than it is, the tides that we experience because of gravitational pull, we would have like 100-foot high tidal waves, right, coming in. So I think we have a picture of the tides somewhere here. Oh, and there's the tsunami that follows, okay, with those 100-foot waves. That would be our tides if the moon were just a little larger, okay? And if it were smaller, scientists say that the tides would be so weak that the minerals and the nutrients, that's what the tides do, is they replenish the minerals and the nutrients in the water so that the sea life that lives there can continue to survive, okay? And so it's literally drawing those things off of the land. And were the tides weaker because the moon was smaller, sea life, as we know it, would cease to exist. Okay? And so Metaxas, he just begins to go through, step by step by step. He just shares a number of these things. These are some of the easier ones to sort of wrap our mind around. Now, here's the thing. If you go back to like 1966, okay, they thought that we had to have like basically two components in place for life to be sustained on planet Earth. Okay? But now, in the 60 years that have followed, scientists have come to realize there's like 150 things that have to be perfectly fine-tuned exactly just so things like the size of the moon and the rotation of the Earth and the proximity of Jupiter, 150 of those things have to be in place for life to be sustainable on any one given planet. In other words, we should not be here. And for those of you that are into mathematical cool statistics, okay, from a mathematical standpoint, the odds of all 150 things being in place for any one planet in our solar system, or in our universe, not just our solar system, in the universe, to sustain life, how do I say this? 1 in 10 to the 50th power, okay? Here's what that number looks like. It's a 1 with 50 zeros after it. My calculator would only let me put 15. And it's like, the number's too big, basically. It's huge, okay? It's like only slightly better odds than the Packers have of winning today, okay? It's really close, okay? In other words, the chance that we should be here is essentially zero. Right? We should not be here. Life should not exist on this planet, and yet, quite obviously, it does exist, and it exists in a fine-tuned fashion. Okay? Well, Nate, playing his guitar up here, his guitar was tuned, but guess what? It had a tuner, presumably Nate. Okay? Somebody tuned that guitar. Well, if we live on a fine-tuned planet, the question needs to be asked, who is the tuner? who has fine-tuned this planet, and it certainly is not less intelligent. I want to empower you with this, okay? Because scientists and evolutionists and schools today, they will try and make you feel like you're less intelligent for believing in a creator God. And I'm telling you, all the scientific evidence points to the fact that you are more intelligent to believe in a creator God. It takes more faith to believe that something just happened out of nothing out there in the middle of the cosmos 4 billion years ago, and all of those very specific things just happened to fall in place. Okay? So be empowered. You're not dumb for thinking creation happened at the hand of a creator God. It did happen at the hand of a creator God, and that is reason number one why you should look at your life and say, yeah, he made me and everything, and he did it in precise fashion. Maybe I should put him as center of my life. By the way, if all of that didn't convince you, maybe you don't get into that, but I get into some of those kind of fun facts like that. If all of that didn't convince you that Jesus is supreme and 100% worthy to be center of your life, just think about this, okay? Not only did he create all that stuff in regards to earth, okay? The Bible, which we just read in Colossians, is the heavens, right? He created the heavens. So think about this just for a fun second here, okay? Psalm 147 says this. It says, he determines the number of stars and calls them each by name. He determined the number of stars and called them each by name. Astronomers estimate that in the observable universe, so this is just what we can study, like with a really powerful telescope, like the Hubble telescope. In the observable universe, there are around 100 billion, with a B, billion galaxies. Okay, not stars, galaxies. In the observable universe, so just what we can see. So like our own Milky Way galaxy, okay, right here, that little blue arrow up there at the top, that's our sun. Okay, that's our sun. That's how insignificant our sun is in the scope of just the Milky Way galaxy, and there's observable to us 100 billion of these. Some bigger, some much larger. Okay, and so what they've basically figured out is that in the observable universe, there are roughly, let's go to the next slide, I think, okay? This is an image from the Hubble telescope. Those are not stars. Those are galaxies. Okay? Those are galaxies. Those are small versions of the Milky Way, really, 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 really far away. Okay? And in all of that and what we can see, there is 1 to the 24th power number of stars, right? 1 with 24 zeros after it. Okay? So here's the deal. Every person on planet Earth, there's enough stars in the galaxy, just like our sun, enough of them that every one of us on planet Earth could name 1 trillion of them ourselves. Okay? Some of us have a hard time naming one kid, right? I don't know. Let's call him Junior. Sorry if anybody's name is Junior, okay? Like we can't even think of a name for one kid. But you would have the right to name over 1 trillion stars yourself. And yet what does the Bible say? It says that God, Jesus, knows them all by name. He's determined their position, and he calls them each by name. To put it lightly, Jesus is supreme. He is the center, whether you recognize it or not, and he holds the universe together. This music stand is giving me a little trouble here. Reason number 2. So Paul tells the Colossians, it's not Rome that you need to thank for your full cornucopia. It's not Rome that you need to thank for all the blessings. It's God. He created it all. Okay, so that's reason number 1. It's not Zeus. It's not Artemis. It's not Apollo. It's not Cupid. It's none of those Roman gods. It's Jesus. And that God who became a man and lived amongst us. And that leads us to reason number 2. Okay, not only did he make you, number 2, he bought you. He bought you. The very next thing the Apostle Paul writes after he talks about all of God's creation, he writes this, and he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything he might have the supremacy. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. Once you were alienated from God and were enemies in your minds because of your evil behavior, but now he has reconciled you by Christ's physical body through death to present you holy in his sight, without blemish and free from accusation. If it isn't enough that he made you, then perhaps Christ deserves to be the center because he bought you. Because he bought you. 1 Corinthians 6, verse 19 and 20 says this, you are not your own, you were bought at a price. You were bought at a price. And you know what? When he bought you, he didn't buy you in fine condition. He bought you while you were broken. He bought you when the world had thrown you off to the side, cast you away, no longer worth much. In your brokenness, he still paid the price for you, and it was costly. He literally laid down his life, sacrificed it on the cross, and now, as we just read, he presents you blameless before God, without blemish and free of accusation. Anybody ever been to a store in town called the Restore? Who's ever been to the Restore? Okay, you go to the Restore, and I go. It's a secondhand store, right? You drop off the furniture you don't want and that kind of stuff anymore. You drop it off there, right? So I walk into this Restore. I've been there a few times, and I'm gonna be honest. All I see is junk. I see junk. I see broken chairs and worn out chairs and out of date furniture, and it's no longer useful. To me, it's trash, okay? But some of you walk into the Restore and you don't see junk, you see potential, right? You see a chair and you're like, oh, all it needs is a little love, a little elbow grease, just reupholster it and it'll be beautiful, okay? And so you buy that thing and you pay like $5 for it or something, pretty cheap, right? And then you put a little love in that thing and you put it in your living room and it's beautiful. And people come over and they're like, oh, where did you get that new chair? It looks like you bought that at, Pier 1. You're like, nope, got it at the Restore, $5. Put a little work into it, put a little love into it, reupholstered it. Voila, I have a chair, right? Well, guess what? That's exactly what Christ did, right? Your life was on the scrap heap. It was broken. The best of us were broken. And Jesus said, you know what? I don't see a broken piece of junk that's worthless. I see potential. And he picked your life off of the scrap heap, and he bought you. He paid his own life for you. And he's made peace through the cross, and he's reupholstered you, right? He's cleaned up the smudges, and he's beautified you. And he presents you to God now, reconciled, the Bible says. Ephesians 1 says this, that power, this is talking about Jesus, that power is the same as the mighty strength he exerted when he raised Christ from the dead and seated him at his right hand in the heavenly realms, far above all rule and authority, power and dominion, and every name that is invoked, not only in the present age, but also in the one to come. And God placed all things under his feet and appointed him to be head over everything for the church, which is the body, the fullness of him who fills everything in every way. What Ephesians 1 is telling us is this, basically, Jesus bought you. God made him boss over you. God made Jesus boss over you, literally appointed him as the authority over you. Jesus said, I'm going to purchase them. I'm going to take them off. Listen, the devil, he deceived you. He misguided you. He mistreated you. He used you. And when he was done with you, he mockingly cast you aside. Jesus said, I'm going to buy that life. I'm going to purchase that life with my own life. And God said, because you did that, now I give you all authority over them. Okay? I'm literally appointing you as boss over them. Okay? So if it's not enough that he made you, by the way, that's Romans 5:8. God demonstrated his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Okay? It's not enough that he made you. Then how about the fact that he bought you as a reason to place Christ as the center of your life? That's the question of the day. Is Jesus the center of your life? Is Jesus the center of your life? And if it's not Christ, then what is? In what case can that thing or that person that is in the center of your life, what case can they make to be, or can that thing make to be the center of your life? This morning, that's our cause to evaluate that question. It's something I hope every one of us will take seriously. Is something besides Jesus the center of my life? Ask the Lord to show you. Lord, what's taken your place in my heart? Now what are you going to do about it? Let's not just talk about, well, I don't want Jesus. I want Jesus to be the center of my life. I don't want this thing. Let's not talk about it. What are you going to do about it? Okay, because God's not interested in a bunch of talk and no action. Isaiah 29 says this, the Lord says, these people come near me with their mouth and honor me with their lips. Their hearts are far from me. In other words, you can say all the right things to God. He's not buying it until you take action. Right? You can talk all you want. Prove it. Jesus, you're the center of my life. Okay? Prove it. You know, I'm not sure if you know this, but Queen Elizabeth, who knows what Queen Elizabeth is, right? Do you know she doesn't have any real power these days? I mean, Queen Elizabeth, they declare her Queen of England. She can't declare war. She can't dictate policy, right? She can't even send a criminal to the gallows. Queen Elizabeth has no actual power. She's like this figurehead, right? Oh, she's our queen. Listen, the real people that have the power are people like Winston Churchill and the prime minister and, you know, like the politicians. The queen is just like this person that they celebrate, and it's like in name only. Oh, we celebrate the royal family, and the tabloids follow them around. Okay, they don't have actual real power. And yet some of us, that's exactly the position we've put Christ in our life, that we say he's the king. He's the center. Doesn't have any power in our life. Doesn't have any actual real authority to make decisions in our life. We don't actually listen to what he says. He's just a figurehead. That's not how you want to live your life. You don't want to have a Queen Elizabeth type relationship with Jesus. He's the center of your life. Or he should be. Jesus isn't interested in you just saying he's Lord. He wants to actually be Lord. As musicians come this morning, there's just one other quick thought I want to leave you with. This is really interesting to me. That passage in Colossians 1, scholars actually believe it's a song. Now, I know we look at it, we don't see a song, but those that know what they're looking for, it's a song, it's a hymn, okay? And they point to the all things, the cadence of it, right? The heaven and earth, kind of cadence of it, the seen and unseen. There's a lot of evidence to suggest this is a hymn. Well, why would that be a hymn? Okay? Why would, of all the passages of Scriptures, why would that be a song that's intended to be sung? Well, here's what songs do. They help us remember things. They help us remember things. If I bring my little 5-year-old girl, Kiana, up here, and I say, Kiana, we're going to learn the days of the week. If I say, okay, Kiana, repeat after me. Sunday, Sunday, Monday, Monday, Tuesday, Tuesday, and so on. Okay, now tell me the days of the week. She's going to look at me like, so you know what we did? Teach her a little song. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. There are 7 days, there are 7 days, there are 7 days in the week. She sings it in the bathtub. Some of you saw the YouTube video or the Facebook post, you know. Singing Friday, Saturday. She loves it, okay? She knows her days of the week. Why? We gave her a song to help her remember it. You did the same thing, every last person in this room, a little something called ABC, right? You learned your ABCs with a song, helped you to remember it, okay? I think the Apostle Paul is looking at these new Christians who live in this town called Colossae, and every day they live amongst people that are saying, the Romans did this for us. The Romans have blessed us. Zeus has blessed us. They're sitting down and they're breaking bread with their companions, and while their companions are saying, look at what Zeus and the Romans have done for us. I think Paul wanted those new Christians to be remembering, and wait a second, it wasn't Zeus. It wasn't the Romans. And he put a little song in their head, and the simple version of the song goes something like this. He made me, he bought me, I'm his. He should be the center. He made me, he bought me, I'm his. He should be the center. When they walked out to walk down the road and they saw all of the commerce and all the trade and all the ways to making money, he made me, he bought me, I'm his. He deserves to be the center. When they ate at the bounty of their table, he made me, he bought me. He deserves to be the center. I'm his. As they looked at that lush paradise of produce, picking grapes off of the vine, he made me, he bought me, I'm his. He deserves to be the center. Can we just say that together? Can we just say that together here this morning? Just repeat it with me a few times. He made me, he bought me, I'm his. He deserves to be the center. He made me. He bought me. I'm his. He deserves to be the center. What in your life has taken the center place? What in your life is the big thing that all the other things revolve around? Everybody here, hopefully this morning, received a green slip of paper. If you didn't, we would love to get you one. If you'll just slip up your hand, somebody will help me get these green slips of paper to somebody else who needs them, okay? Just slip up your hand. Here's what I want you to do. If you need one of these, okay? The band is going to play. Thank you. The band is going to play. They're going to play that song, Jesus Be the Center, okay? And here's how we're going to close service today. I want you to take however much time you need. It might be 30 seconds. It might be 5 minutes, okay? And I want you to use that green piece of paper. I want you to ask God this question. Lord, what is at the center of my life? If not you, what is at the center of my life? What are the other things in my life revolving around? Okay? And I want you to just use that paper, and I just want you to write it down. And it might be one thing, two things, four things that you say, man, God, you've showed me. Just ask that question and then just quietly reflect. And when he's given you an answer, write it down. And here's what I want you to do. I'm going to move this cornucopia somewhere up there. As you exit this morning, this we're not going to have a formal dismissal. When you're ready, you can slip out. And I just want you to fold that piece of paper, just toss it on this platter of fruit. And here's what you're saying. Lord, I'm acknowledging that this thing isn't my source. This thing isn't my center. This thing isn't the reason that I've got this awesome supply in my life. God, I throw that thing down and I declare you are my center. You are my source. Let me pray for you, and then the band's gonna sing. Lord, show us right now. If you are not the center, Lord Jesus, then what is or who is? And God, we just make it our declaration. God, in this season of all things new, God, give us a new center, and may that center be you. God, we invite you to speak to us over these next few moments. And God, we will listen. Thank you for these awesome people, God. I speak blessing over them. God, I thank you so much for them. In Jesus' name, amen. As you hear from the Lord, you are dismissed. You can respond and you can slip out. The band is going to sing.